What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Attention to Detail, the podcast. Today, I have a great guest, actually the first guest on here, Mike G, aka you guys probably know him, Mr. Do It Moving. How you doing?
Yeah. Oh man, I'm blessed. I'm excited, and I'm honored to be guest number one. There's only one on one, and I'm
Yes,
that. So that
yes,
makes me
sir.
extremely excited. So thank you for having me.
For sure. Honored to have you as my first guest. So today, if people don't know who you are, I think a lot of the people who will be tuning into this will know who you are. If they don't, or if they don't know too much about you, just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, how you got here, all the above.
Yeah, I can give you the 1 hour version, or I can give you the 5 minute version. I'm going to elect with the 5 minute version. But man, I'm just a young guy with a extreme passion to make people better, to help people better, and to influence and change them in a positive light through performance training. And performance training for me is anything under the umbrella of recovery, obviously training, movement, nutrition, sleep, and the like. So the way I got started in that bit is pretty much how most of us did get started that do this. And we were once athletes. We didn't quite make it or couldn't cut it at the pro level, or even was good enough to try to get to the pro level.
Oh, yeah.
I played American football for the international listeners. And, you know, I'm 5'8.5", 170-pound Asian dude who runs a 4.6 in the 40s. So I already have a strike against me because I'm Asian.
Yeah, yeah.
We're not known to play football, but
Oh, yeah.
I found a way to get a Division II scholarship, and that was pretty much, I think, my peak athletically, but naturally transitioned into performance because I was always a high energy dude. I always loved to motivate my teammates. I always loved to train because I felt that was the way I can gain an edge for lack of genetic potential. And it was a natural transition for me. So right after school, tried out for like a little free agent combine, didn't run fast enough. And in the midst of training for that combine is how I was birthed to potentially get an internship for a facility, which grew into doing training outside on the soccer pitch, outside on the blacktop basketball court, traveling from appointment to appointment all over Southern California, and then finally getting tired of traveling and putting 20,000 miles on my car in a single year, I landed an internship at what was known as the Elite Performance Factory. And this was my big break because I was exposed to the likes of Reggie Bush, Malcolm Smith, Richard Sherman, big time football players that most people know and recognize today. And that was kind of my big break. That was when I was allowed to shine my light, so to speak, get to know people, vibe with people, and then everything else just kind of unfolded from there.
Love it. So I'm going to kind of delay getting into this first question and kind of go back to, I think a lot of us, like you said, are guys who don't have that edge to make it pro. So let's say you're talking to someone who's at that, they're still playing, but they're kind of eyeing that next step, which is going to be in the realm of physical preparation, performance training, whatever you want to call it. You know, we can call it a million different things, but what's one piece of advice for a potential future trainer, anything, like you said, under that umbrella that's still playing, but wants to kind of get that edge, get started early before they actually have to dive into it?
I'm going to answer this from the perspective of what I wish somebody would have told me.
Nice. Perfect.
Yeah. And that is get a mentor early. You know, if this is a field that you are in absolute love with and you have a burning passion for, and you know what I mean, that feeling of that excitement to go work with somebody, and it didn't really matter who it was, who was in front of you. You were just excited to be in front of them and training them and getting them better and influencing them. Exactly. I didn't have a mentor early. I kind of just copied anything and everyone that I came across through the internet and books. So early on, Mike Boyle, Gray Cook, Mark Verstegen, you know, Nick Winkleman, all the OGs of our field that I think have done us justice, I would just copy them, not knowing if it was good or bad. Obviously, it was good, not knowing what I know now. But I was just like, hey, if they're training pro athletes and they're saying this, then that means that it must be good. So let me just go ahead and copy it. But I think having a mentor that you can be exposed to on a daily, if not weekly, basis to bounce questions off of, to shadow, to run program design by, you know what I mean? Like the basic fundamental, to even ask social questions about how to relate to people, things that truly matter that we don't really learn in school is probably going to be the best advice. So any young up and comers out there, get a mentor early, reach out. Don't be afraid to be rejected, because some people won't respond to your emails. Some people won't respond to your calls or DMs these days. And that's okay, because people are busy. You got to have an empathy of what they're doing and in their life and everyday struggle. And I think that if you can latch on to someone early, that's going to be the biggest influence on you and your philosophy design as you develop as a coach.
No, I love it. I love it. So I'm going to throw kind of a big question at you. We can kind of build off this and you can answer it any way you want to. Let's take 3 qualities. You can give me 2, give me 4, however many you want. We'll start with 3. What are 3 kind of qualities that you don't feel like young, say high school age athletes target enough? So this can be under the, like you said, there's so many realms to that performance training. There's nutrition, recovery. This can be under the purely training side, or it can be in any of those realms.
Oh, that's a phenomenal question. I feel like a lot of people can gain a lot from this, especially my young guys like 14 to 18. You know, basketball culture, we are basketball people right now. That's just the form that we exist on. But this is for everybody. Sleep is number 1. I think that because of the digital age that we live in, it's hard to get away from screens. There are biohacks that you can do, you know, the blue light blockers. It's hard to sell that, but at the end of the day, turning the screens off and taking your butts to bed so that you can get 7 to 9 hours of sleep is by far the number 1 that I feel like most kids miss. You've heard of stories where guys will growth spurt 3 to 6 inches in college. And I don't have any scientific backing behind this, but I truly believe it's because of the opportunity to sleep. You have more time to sleep in college than you do in high school, because you're afforded that opportunity, because the school schedule, the class schedule is less stringent. You get to pick your schedule, you know, you get more freedom and more liberty. Whereas high school, you're up at 6 every day because you got to be at school by 7:30 or whatever it is. And all the kids that I've ever worked with are on their phones, you know, scrolling Instagram mindlessly, falling into the rabbit hole, or playing a game until 11:30. And it's so discouraging because they're missing the most number 1 and free recovery tool in the book. Deep sleep. So that would be number 1 for sure. And anytime I get in front of a high school kid, that I preach that till I'm blue in the face. If you can already tell.
No, exactly. And I think, just real quick before you get into the second one, I think one way I've been kind of implementing this, because I figured, I was like, damn, I'm saying this over and over again. I'm showing them studies, like going so far to preach this to them, but I wasn't getting more than 6 hours of sleep myself a night. So I'll look at myself and I was like, damn, how can I be preaching this to them when I'm not doing it myself? So I think something that's helped me, and this can be a very practical application for anyone listening to this, if you sleep more yourself, and you, like, I know you have you have a Whoop, or is it another? Yeah, exactly. So I just show them, like, show up to the session, even if it's early morning, I'm like, yo, look, it's like 7.5 hours, however much it is. And that holds them accountable, because they know that I'm doing it, and leading by example as coaches, as trainers, is huge. It's huge. So that's kind of a practical application that I've been wanting to share with people more and more. But what's up for number 2?
Yeah, that's huge. Number two, I think that we often get wrapped up in training too much,
Yeah,
and training can be qualified as practicing your sport. Training can be also qualified as skill development outside of practice, and also what we do, which is performance training.
yeah,
And when you pack a schedule, look, what at the end of the day, what is training? It's a stressor.
yeah,
Period. It's a stressor. And maybe technical training aside, but physical training is a stressor which we're trying to impose to get a specific adaptation.
right.
Right? We're trying to get the body to adapt. However, if your body isn't ready to receive said adaptations or stressors, it will not adapt.
Yep.
So I think that we get wrapped up in the more is better mindset, and we actually do more harm than good. And then you have bad coaches out there that don't really care
Mm-hmm.
about what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
and
No, I don't care.
they don't, and they just pour it on, and these kids just get beat up, and they wonder why they are struggling with nagging injuries, or they wonder why they get sick, or they wonder why they're struggling in school and XYZ. And I feel like we're overfilling the training bucket. You know what I mean? And that's unfortunate, and it's hard to quantify, like, am I training too much? But the writing is really on the wall, not to mention kids that aren't sleeping and aren't eating well and then overtraining. That's just like the trilogy of death.
Yeah,
And it's unfortunate, but it's like I was saying, it's hard to quantify, but listen to the writings on the wall or read the writings on the wall. You know, how do I feel? What is my mood like? Am I happy? Am I like grumpy all the time? Am I annoyed easily? Am I motivated to go to practice, to go to school? What do I just want to sleep all the time? Am I falling
yeah,
asleep in class in front of the computer now because it's Zoom? These are the things that we need to really pay attention to and teach our kids what to pay attention to, so that we can truly understand what truly do we need. Is
yeah,
it more training, less training? Are we hitting the mark? So I think that's definitely something that we need to focus and preach to our athletes at a young age.
yeah. And I like that. And I think a point kind of following up from that is all the things that you mentioned were subjective. So how do I feel? Am I falling asleep in class? All these things, you don't need any metrics to quantify. Now we can come in, test your vertical jump. There's a ton of different tests to kind of measure that.
Sure.
Real literally you can think of a bunch of different tests to measure how fried your central nervous system is
Right.
essentially.
Physical readiness or
Yeah,
preparedness.
exactly. Physical readiness. Yeah, exactly. How prepared are we? Are we ready to go hard? And then, like again, that's the whole idea of the whoop strap is how ready are we to push ourselves?
Sure.
But at the end of the day, you don't have to have any crazy metrics or technology to do this. Check in with yourself every single day. It can be in a journal. You could write it down. It could be on your phone,
Yes.
or it could just be a mental check. Like, yo, why am I pushing myself to a 10 out of 10 RPE or level, whatever you want to call it, if I feel like shit today?
Right.
And I think the more that we glorify taking a step back and scaling our training back rather than pushing it over the limit and continuing to fill that bucket, which is tough because we glorify players like Kobe and MJ,
Yep.
who were probably genetically different than us. And
Exactly.
they have one, they've built up the tolerance to that. And two, we're not built like Kobe. We're not built like MJ. They
That's
could,
why they're Kobe. And
that's why exactly. So I think kind of spreading that and glorifying taking a day off, taking a light day, that's kind of the next step. And I think a lot of players will not only get injured less, but they'll also see their training doing less training, they'll see more results from it. And I think that's something that I've been learning more and more is teaching players to scale it back will automatically explode their results sometimes. And it's crazy. It's almost counterproductive or it's almost counterintuitive, but it is
correct.
what it is. That's how our bodies work.
Correct. You hear of of athletes who like maybe, I don't know, they get sick and they're sidelined for 3 weeks or 4 weeks or
Yeah.
whatever, and then all of a sudden they come back and they jump higher than they ever have.
Oh yeah.
It's like,
No, exactly. No,
what?
I had a few guys that went to like spring break. They went like whatever. I mean, I'm in Miami, but they went like wherever you want to call it, Cancun, wherever. They eat like
Sure.
shit. They party, whatever. They come back and they're hooping better than ever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what? Like
Mm-hmm.
this doesn't make sense. But if you think about it, they filled up that bucket so much that it's just overflowing. And
Overflowing.
now that there's a little bit of time to recover, they're eating a ton of calories. They can recover. They can super
Yeah,
compensate now. They come back and, like you said, they're jumping higher. They're dunking, doing dunks they've never done before.
that
And I
part.
think, yeah, it really all comes back to monitoring how much we're actually training, because it's normally a lot. Like you said, training is a lot more than what we think it is. When we
Correct.
go play pickup games, we can consider
Training
that
and effect.
training. We
Yep.
can consider that training. There's a lot of things that aren't just getting in the weight room, getting our skills workouts in. They just continue to overflow that bucket.
Correct. Well said, sir. Well said. Uh, Lastly, I'd like to talk about um, the, oh man, I had it in my brain and it left me.
I'm trying to think of.
I have it. I have it. Because you
Okay,
spoke
cool. Let's do it.
about calories. You spoke about calories
Okay.
and how they were able to consume calories. And I think that's a big one. We're
Yeah.
not eating enough.
Yeah.
As kids, we're not eating enough. And, you know, through those very critical times of periods of time is when we're growing the most. And then not only are you adding the stimuli of training and playing and practicing, we're not supporting all of that activity with enough calories. And I don't know what it is. I mean, some of it could be resources.
Yeah.
Understood. And, you know, that's a whole nother can of worms that we can go into. However,
Oh yeah.
you see what I'm saying? However, since we are practicing so much and training so much and playing so much, we need to supplement all that activity with enough calories to sustain all that workload, right?
Yeah.
And I truly believe that kids aren't eating enough. And once again, when you get to college, you have an overabundance amount of resource and food available. So it's put in front of you all the time. Here's your training table, right? Here's your shake. Here's your pre-shake. Here's your post-shake. Here's this big array and buffet of food. Like you get to pick and choose what you want. Let's not even go into the quality in which of the calories are, but calories essentially at its fundamental base of like, are you eating enough calories?
Yeah.
And, you know, I try to teach kids about the calorically rich foods. Yeah. So your fats obviously are going to be super high in calories and that are relatively easy to eat. Most hoopers that I've ever come across don't like avocado.
No.
If I put it in a shake and don't tell them it's in there, they're like, I guess I like avocado. And that's an easy way to put 300-400 calories in your shake that is going to help you sustain all that activity. And you know bars and just coming up with creative ways, easy, applicable, practical ways to get more calories into these kids is something that I feel like we need to work on more as coaches. We may not be nutritionists, but we know what are high calorically dense foods, and we need to be preaching that excessively.
Yeah, 100%. I love it. I preach that. That's another thing I say a lot is like, there's a difference between performance and training for aesthetics. And I think it's weight loss. You see it on every magazine in the grocery store. You see it everywhere. And I think players and even parents think lower calorie. When for athletes, it's the opposite.
Yep.
Except for with the exception of some cases, but it's the opposite. All right, so let's shift a little bit to the training side. I've seen you in some recent posts. You've been talking a lot about positional awareness. I believe it's what you've been calling it. And I like what you're getting at with that a lot. So I want you to expand on that, maybe talk about some of the exercise that you demonstrated on IG recently, and just give us a little bit more about that.
Position awareness is a phrase or term that basically describes movement variability, and within said variability, being able to understand, be confident, and own specific positions that aren't necessarily taught traditionally in the weight room with load. Now, when you explain load or describe load, load doesn't necessarily mean max effort. And I think that that's a misconception, especially for like the older generation strength coaches, that everything needs to be heavy. You need to build strength. And I'm not saying I don't agree with building strength or getting stronger, because obviously that's important to create force. However, if you study movement, especially in sport, it's very dynamic.
Yeah.
Never, in most court and field sport, never one movement is alike, or two movements are alike rather.
Right.
Which lends itself to me that we should be training variability often. So when I say positional awareness, I'll put a horizontal vector using a super band around somebody's knee, put them in a split squat position, and have them explore valgus with load.
Yeah.
It's controlled, it's safe, and the load isn't heavy per se, but it challenges all the musculature involved in that movement. And I think that there's something to be said about cortical robustness, creating a more robust cortical map, if you will, cognitively, so that when people are put in positions on the court or field, their brain understands those positions.
Yeah.
And the weight room is supposed to be the most controlled environment that an athlete sees. So why not expose them to those positions where it's safe and controlled?
Right.
So when I say position awareness, I'll take a kettlebell, I'll take a super band, I'll change vectors, horizontal, vertical, diagonal, whatever it is, and create the idea that if I put you in this position, not only are you safe, but your brain is going to recognize this as safe. And I need you to own these positions. Owning meaning you're stable and you're confident. And I think that when we train variability in this way, we're creating this awareness within our brain and body that allows us to understand movement a little bit better in our sport.
Nice. I like it. Good answer. So 2 follow-up questions. I'm going to start with one. This one may ruffle some feathers, but this is something that's kind of been marinating in my mind a lot. Is it kind of traditional programming where we're doing the same exercises essentially over and over again? We're not getting exposed to, I would say, enough positions, kind of relating back to positional awareness. What do you think about maybe getting into some programming where there is more variability, where we do more different things? It's not the same thing on one day every single week for however long the block is, because we need to be exposed to these positions. What are your thoughts on that?
I think those feathers need to be ruffled.
Yeah.
And I say that confidently because whether it's stubbornness or anecdotal, I don't know what other reasons that they would have this stubborn mindset, but the fact of the matter is the human body is going to adapt to whatever you expose it to. And if you continue to do the same thing over and over and over again, where is the cognitive richness that is going to truly transfer to the sport that they're getting prepared for? And I think that because variability is so rich in sport, it's only natural that it should be so rich as well as in the weight room. So challenging those ideas and principles, I think, is coming more and more these days. But there still is that little pocket of people that believe that, nah, stronger is the only way. We need to lift heavy. We need to do it in the sagittal and vertical plane. And we need to just make sure that these guys are putting up numbers.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. Load is key in tissue tolerance. And I'm a firm believer of developing said tissue tolerance. But guess what? Once that box is checked and your athlete is strong, there are other things that we can be getting better at as well in the weight room. And that's pretty much my way and philosophy of training. You could do it at the same time. You don't have to do one stage and then move on to the next. And then, you know, I'm strong and now I can go to no, you can marry the two concepts together. If you watch some of my videos with Drew, he has over 400 pounds on his back doing a rear foot elevated split squat, which means that I do believe in strength. But just because he can do 600 doesn't mean I need to do that to him.
Right.
Strength is relative. He is strong enough to do what he needs to do on the court, guard bigs.
Right.
But the variability is what protects him from getting into poor positions and postures, potentially. Don't know, I have no science behind this, but potentially that's going to help him keep him safe.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where my mindset is with that whole conversation. Ruffle those feathers. And it's okay because conversation is what helps us develop and get better as a group.
No, exactly. I love that. And I think one thing that you said that really probably resonates with some people is that it doesn't have to be so periodized. I don't think like, all right, we're going to get strong, then we're going to add in some power work, then we're going to add in, like, I get where that's coming from. I love progressive overload when we're talking about strength tissue tolerance, but at the same time, especially for high school, college hoopers, hooping is year round. So if we get them really strong, but we don't have any variability, boom, they got to go to an AAU tournament and they get hurt because we've been doing purely sagittal work, purely just loading a bunch of weight on their back. That's my fault, or that's whoever's training fault. And I think it shouldn't, again, these feathers should be ruffled a little bit because there should be more variability. There should be more comfort kind of going out of the traditional norms, while still checking off the box of, like you said, tissue tolerance. So I think it's good to hear that from you as well, and hear it confidently as well.
100%.
All right, so second follow-up to that, what are a few positions, you don't have, obviously they're very detailed, so it'd be better to actually show these, but what are a few positions that you would say are big for hoopers, and or how do you go about identifying positions that you want to target in the weight room?
We have conversations about this, you know, Drew and I and anyone else, AD and I and anyone else who works with me. Obviously, you take a self-appraisal as a basketball player. What do I need to get better at, right?
Yeah.
And a common thread is that Achilles thing. That Achilles thing scares the hell out of everybody because it's happening. The last dude who did it, I'm not going to say his name because I try not to name drop on behalf of people I don't really talk to.
Yeah.
He hit a three. He was backpedaling. He took a small step to go forward, and boom, that thing went out. And that for me is like, what the hell?
Yeah.
So the MOI of that particular injury is very consistent. It's usually when an athlete is going from a backwards traveling position into a forward traveling position with speed and velocity. And it's when the brake leg is extended and the heel drops. It's very consistent. So that position for me is something that we train the hell out of all the time. It's all over my posts. Floating heel, heel elevated yielding isometrics, heel elevated overcoming isometrics. I'm consistently trying to challenge that high heel extended leg position and even bent knee position to build up, once again, that tissue tolerance in the plantar fascia, all the way up into the Achilles, all the way up into the calf and beyond, because if you follow Anatomy Trains, that backline fascia runs all the way up from the big toe all the way up the foot and all the way up the back of the leg. So we're consistently trying to challenge that position all the time in different variabilities and vectors. And I feel like that strategy is something that is continuing to gain more popularity.
Yeah.
Today, I saw someone on Instagram post an isometric using a cable system wrapped around his waist.
I saw that.
Yeah, and he was in that same position. And I reposted it immediately. Like, this is what I'm talking about right here.
Yeah.
And he beat me to that post, but congrats though, because that's exactly what we need to be doing. And it just makes so much sense. I was just on the phone with an NBA strength coach yesterday, and we were talking about how to quantify those loads and those forces using force plates. And I'm like, this is something that whoever's smart enough to figure that out, I'm going to read that paper and I'm going to apply it, because that type of stuff makes sense to me.
No, it does. And you talked also about the exploring in a controlled setting, of course, knee valgus, all these positions that are typically neglected because we're scared of an injury, and giving us confidence. Like you said, it's important to help us understand cognitively that we are safe in these positions, especially if we build tolerance in those positions. So that's great stuff for sure. And we could go on and on and on about positions that hoopers see. I really like that acceleration position though. I was trying to think, because I don't have a cable. I have a little spot in my garage that I just train guys out of. The cable is the next thing I was getting. And I was like, all right, how can I attack this position? Because that's a lot of what I see. Even in terms of performance, like a lot of guys will get into that second or third step, and what you'll see is that heel will just, there's so much compliance in it. Yeah, there's so much compliance in it. And then that next step is with a flat foot, and it just ruins their acceleration. Yeah, exactly. And it could pop. It's really, really, really important to target that. And I think it's becoming more and more known these days and applied these days. And it's great. I like seeing that a lot more.
I mean, that movement, that biomechanic is used. Those kinematics are used.
Oh yeah.
Probably count 100 times if you watch. So not only from an injury, in respect to injury, but also from a performance standpoint.
Right.
Like, this is a movement that I need to be able to do not only all the time, but really well.
Yeah.
You know, and I watch all the skill videos too, and I'm like, guys are teaching this stuff. They probably don't even realize how important that back foot is to push and explode into that second foot or second step. And it's like, you can train that.
No, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And that's part of where I talk about fusing the weight room or the physical side and the skill side. Is like, all right, if I'm going to teach a guy, or if I'm going to work with a guy on their first step, and that we're getting into that negative step where it's the MOI, we're kind of getting into exposing them to potential MOI. Sure. I want to build up that tolerance concurrently or beforehand in the weight room to know and to be confident that, all right, look, this guy's healthy enough in this position to do this. So we're not attacking it too hard and kind of tearing away at what could end up being an injury. So I think injury prevention is another thing where the weight room or the physical side and the core side have to be perfectly intertwined.
Absolutely.
All right. So shifting gears a little bit, how do you, and I'll kind of make this question more specific, how do you approach mobility? So I've seen you doing some of the FRC principles, which I'm starting to like more and more. So explain, let's take this from a kind of a hooper's perspective. So say we're talking to like a high school, college hooper. A lot of them are still kind of, all right, I'm going to stretch out my hamstrings, 30 seconds. I'm going to stretch, and just that typical kind of static stretching routine. So talk a little bit about how mobility has evolved, why it's important, in kind of the lens of a younger hooper.
The difficult part about influencing younger hoopers in the way I stretch is that it requires much discipline, because I use what works. And what I've seen in my experience, what works is functional range conditioning. Shout out to them, Andrew Spina, all the fellas over
It's
there.
good
They
stuff.
phenomenal work. And I was lucky enough to get into their courses prior to the huge upgrade that they made. But that's neither here nor there. It's loaded. It's essentially just loading loading mobility. It's loading stretch. It's PNF in a sense.
Yeah.
And PNF is basically contract, relax, contract, right? So I think the main thing that people need to understand is that in order for mobility to stick, okay, that's the thing. You want it to stick. You want it to be permanent. You want it to continue throughout the day, right? Not just go away after an hour, is that you must connect the brain to the mobility. And how do we do that? We have to fire. We have to contract. We have to create some innervation. So if I put an athlete in a perfect RDL hinge position and put 25-pound dumbbells in his hands and hold that for a minute, guess what? That mobility is going to stick because we are loading a stretch. If I put an athlete in a pigeon on a bench, because most basketball athletes cannot do a pigeon on the floor, and I have him bring his hands to his chest but still maintain that position and posture, we are now stretching the external rotators of the hip and loading them at the same time. And that's what makes mobility sticky. So figuring out creative ways to do that has been a journey for me, and I copy a lot of people out there. That's okay. I'm cool with that.
Oh, yeah.
I copy away.
I copy the shit out of you.
I'll give credit, but I copy. And that's the point, is that if you are doing a targeted stretch that gets it done well and then figuring out a way to load it, these are the things that we need to be teaching our kids. And it doesn't feel good. Passive stretching feels good.
Yeah.
Right? It's easy, no effort.
Oh, yeah.
Active stretching or FRC workout. Or loading stretching is a workout in itself, and it doesn't feel good. But listen, my principle has always been this way. Something ain't worth having without a little bit of struggle. And it's that simple.
No, yeah, it just makes sense. The easy stuff isn't going to be the one that gets you better or gets you more mobile, moving better on the court. I love it though. All right, so every trainer, every coach has sort of an assessment process. Now everyone kind of approaches it from different ways. Some will do like a few days or one day at the beginning of working with an athlete to kind of check all the boxes, see where everyone's at. Others will kind of jump into it a little bit more and use the training as the assessment. Where do you stand on that? It's kind of a spectrum, but talk about how you assess players and how it's kind of in a continuous process.
I think that it's kind of like a it depends answer, but like let's say, okay, I'll go two different scenarios. I got a guy come in, hit me up last minute. I have 2 weeks. Can we work out? Okay, my assessment is going to be within the workout. I got 2 weeks. I don't want to try to waste too much time trying to figure out, the objectiveness of whatever assessment that I'm trying to execute. Let me go ahead and maximize the training time and then be super observative of how this dude moves or this lady moves. But let's say I have someone that for, 6 weeks. Okay, my assessment first starts off with an interview. I need to know how this person ticks, because the way my session is going to be delivered is definitely going to be based on what this person likes, dislikes, type of music they like, what motivates them, what their why is, how much they're bought in. Are they just working out to check the box, or are they working out because they truly want to get better? Everyone has different goals when it comes to training. So it allows me to create a spectrum of how much to expect out of the person, because I don't want to be like 1,000% sold that this person is going to do anything and everything I tell them, and they're only like 10% sold. So that changes the emotional attachment to the expectation, if that makes sense. Super important for me because I'm a very emotional dude.
Yeah.
From there, get to know the person. From there, why not how do they move? Put them on the table, lay them on their back, put them on their stomach, find passive range of motion, find active range of motion with gravity, not much of a factor. I think that has a lot of, therapists do that. Pretty much physical therapy, chiropractics, they all do the same thing in terms of limiting gravity to see how people move in their joints. I think there's a lot of help that can come from that. Then we add gravity, use a lot of FRC or FRA principles, seeing how well they can hold their own body weight under gravity at end range. And then finding a ratio between passive and active range as well. We talk a lot about, I might be able to push, you might be laying down on your back and doing a active straight leg raise, and I can push your leg past 90 degrees, no problem. But then when I have you do it on your own, you can only get to 45 degrees. So there's a big 45-degree gap that you cannot own. You have no stability in 45 degrees of motion, which means that's a danger zone. Once you get into those degrees of freedom that you cannot control, that's a danger zone. So finding out where those ratios are, I feel, is very important. And then I'm big on single leg stability, huge. Get them out their shoes and socks. How do their feet move? How do the big toes move? How do their ankles move? And I'll have something as simple as a single leg balance test. Single leg balance test, eyes closed, and then going into like dynamic hinging. So dynamic hinging is basically anterior, posterior, which is a basic and traditional RDL. And then I'll have them go lateral. So like a lateral RDL where the hip is abducting and adducting. And then I'll go transverse plane. So where the hips are rotating all on a single leg. And I'm just watching like, what does their foot do? What is their balance strategy? Can they keep their big toe down? Do they fail to the lateral aspect of their foot? Do they fail to the medial aspect of the foot? Because that's going to tell me their strategy and where their strength is. And then if we want and we have time, or if it matters, force plate testing with the force plates is something I feel is very important. You can do. I like the mid-thigh isometric pull.
Yeah.
So I won't necessarily do mid-thigh pull with a barbell, but I'll do like a trap bar, or I'll do a harness with a belt squat. Fortunately for me, I have those resources, and that's obviously a blessing that some people don't have. And I feel like that data is very important. Seeing how well people produce force at different joint positions. And that's pretty much about it. I mean, I don't really do vertical jump testing. I don't really do drop jump testing unless it's something that people mention. Like I want to be more explosive at the rim, or I want to be able to jump off of 1 foot, or, whatever. Or if they had like a previous injury where there's a bilateral deficit or asymmetry, then we'll look at things like that. But that's pretty much the introduction assessment stages that I'm approaching the athlete with.
Cool. Love it. All right. So I'm going to take a few follow-ups from that. So let's say there is a big quote unquote danger zone, like you called it, between the passive and active. What is your approach to that if there is, like you said, a 45-degree danger zone right there?
Yeah. So we have to teach the athlete how to own those positions that they don't really have control over. So the ASLR example is the most simple for people to see mentally, is like, all right, if I can passively push your leg beyond 90 degrees, no problem. You're able to keep your lower back flat. The other leg doesn't bend and it's pretty comfortable. But then when you do it on your own, you can't get to that same point. You're like maybe 45 degrees or 60 degrees instead of beyond 90. Then it's just like, all right, well, then we need to train the muscles. I don't know what muscles because I'm not that smart, but we need to train the areas to teach the brain on how to own that range of motion. And there's many strategies on how to do that, but a simple way is that if we're doing ASLR and you don't own that range of motion that you have passively, then I'm just going to put you in that range of motion and I'm going to have you do pails and rails. And pails and rails is basically a really cool way to say, okay, I'm going to have you fire the agonist in that position, and then I'm going to have you fire the antagonist in that position. And we're just going to continue to work those different types of contractions until you're able to truly own that range of motion. Now, obviously, the ASLR is not a super functional exercise because you're laying on your back, and it's like, how does that truly apply? But at the end of the day, hip flexion is hip flexion, right? And the muscles that control that need to be conditioned and need to be trained. And that's a simple way to implement that type of ideology.
Yeah. No, definitely. Definitely. All right. Trying to think. I had another follow-up one. It may come back to me. All right. This is the last big one that I kind of wanted to ask. And then hopefully that follow-up will come to me. We got too wrapped up in your answer, and I was like, damn, trying to focus on that. But anyways, last question here. You can take this literally wherever you want to, but we're talking about this very briefly at the beginning. How do you think, or let's go with why do you think the on-court side, skill development, so to speak, technical side should be so fused with the physical preparation side? How do you see these two coming together? Why is it so important?
For those who are familiar with Franz Bosch, he's a big advocate of the motor learning, motor control, attractors, fluctuators, and constraint-based training. And it's all about creating context, in my opinion, in the weight room. Otherwise, athletes don't really care about what they're doing. For the most part, like that's a very blanketed statement. Of course they care. But how about this? Athletes will care more about what they're doing in the weight room versus not care at all. They'll care more if they understand or can mentally connect the why behind why they're doing what they're doing. So when you look at skill training, I'm not a basketball skill trainer, but I'm smart enough to know that the athletes in front of me, most of them are pro level athletes, can play the game really well. Really good. And I'm not too sure that a skilled trainer is going to get them better at playing basketball. However, if I can create environments that make their skill more robust. And what I mean by that is they can execute their skill in any environment with any perturbation, with any distraction, with any physical state. Then guess what? Their skill is better. I influence their skill positively without even teaching them new skill. Example, if I put a band around your waist, okay, or a bungee. Let's use a bungee. Band's too strong. I put a bungee around your waist, and and I have you shoot. And just before you shoot, I pull the bungee, which creates a lateral perturbation. That is a completely different environment than if you didn't have a bungee around your waist being pulled. Can you execute the same skill well? And the reason why that makes sense to me is because the jump shot movement doesn't change. You can't see me for those who are watching or listening, but maybe you're watching. Your shooting form from your sternum up is supposed to stay the same. And that's what we call an attractor. Things that never change during skill execution. But fluctuators are things that do change in skill execution. For instance, you don't shoot with your feet completely square every time, right? Sometimes you go off 1 foot. Sometimes you're staggered. Sometimes you're wide. Sometimes whatever it is. Sometimes you're fading away. those are fluctuators, but everything sternum high stays the same. So what I'm trying to challenge in that skill robustness is affecting and influencing the fluctuators, but can you still maintain the attractors?
Right.
And that's where training and skill acquisition can blend.
Love it.
This is something that I rarely see, but I feel like we're on to something. And you do it. I don't know if you know you're doing it, but you do it.
Yeah.
And like, for instance, you see me having guys jump off of a plyo box.
Yeah.
That's not a physical quality drill. That's a skill drill.
Yeah.
That is a skill drill, because what am I doing? I'm challenging the environment. I'm putting a constraint on you because you're coming off of a level that challenges your vestibular system, as well as your brain being able to not only land from a distance that you're not used to, but also the absorption, the impact, and then can you still operate and perform said skill, whatever it is, a Euro step, a 1 foot jumper, a side step, a fadeaway, whatever we decide to do. That's the thing, is that I'm creating all these different qualities within that skill we're trying to execute, which makes you able to perform the skill in variability of environments.
Yeah, I love it. And I think all of that can come down. If I had to sum all of that up in a few words, I would say using constraints to create variability. And I think that is something that we don't do enough in general as especially skills trainers. And the more and more that guys like you and hopefully myself continue to push this frontier, I think guys are going to see, and girls are going to see more and more results on the court, even if the training is a bit unorthodox, so to speak. So I love it.
I know people are looking at me because I'm in a gym where there are big time players in there.
Oh yeah.
Big time players. And I don't know if they're looking at me like, the hell are they doing? Or they're like, oh, okay. But the fact of the matter is, I know
it don't matter.
Yeah, I know what I'm doing, and I know what my goal is. And guess what? My guys are at a high level and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. So, you know, these are just ideas that are super novel. I'm not sure if they'll ever catch on, but I do know that it makes sense. And the fact of the matter is, if you continuously perform repetitively drills that don't engage variability, the environment, they're not going to transfer. Simple as that. It's motor learning 101.
Yeah.
And even taking something as simple as fatigue. When I have you do a drill fresh versus fatigue, you are a completely different body. You're a completely different mind. Can you still operate? Why not? Institute and include fatigue in your skill development so that they can learn how to operate tired. That's my wife right there, everybody.
What's up? What's up?
She tried to be all smooth and quiet.
No, you good. You good.
But yeah, it's like,
no, that's perfect.
Makes sense, right? Like,
it all makes sense.
Are you going to be tired in the game?
Hell yeah.
And you operate. Period.
Love it. Love it. All right, I'll take that. That's a perfect way to end it. All right, so I want you to plug yourself a little bit. I know you got an app coming out. So plug that. I will definitely be checking. Yes, sir. I'll definitely be checking that out when the time comes. So plug yourself. Let everybody know where they can find you. A little bit about the app, all that good stuff.
Man, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Everyone out there, be on the lookout. GBG Hoops, the app is coming out. You can follow us at GBG Hoops on Instagram. Basically, it is essentially my life's work in an app. And people hit me up all the time about wanting to work with me, which I welcome and warrant. But at the end of the day, there's only one of me. And sometimes it's not a cost-effective way to work. So what I wanted to do was put together my life's work in an app. an array of training programs, a full menu based on goals, meaning want to be a better defender. Mr. Holiday, right, comes to mind. Want to be a more explosive offensive player. Mike James comes to mind. You know what I mean? These types of programs are going to be available to you. And I'm going to have injury prevention stuff on there, mobility stuff, all types of different types of programs on there so that people are able to work with me anytime that they want all around the world. So check that out. It's coming out in April. And then me personally, you can find me at Mr. Do It Moving, Mr. Do It Moving on Instagram. Hit me on a direct message. I reply 90% of the time. I post content all the time, all educational, and it's just all about giving. GBG stands for Greatness Breeds Greatness, and I just want everybody to be great around me.
Sir, I love it, bro. You the man. Appreciate you for coming on. Hell of an episode, and we'll just stay tuned. For everyone listening, stay tuned for a lot more coming from us, because we're talking a lot of our views, philosophies kind of aligned. So I'm excited to continue working with you, brother.
This was amazing, man. Thank you so much. And I look forward to building a solid relationship with you professionally and personally.